It was an ordinary Tuesday morning at a Starbucks in Washington, D.C. The air smelled of roasted beans and sweet syrups, and the baristas moved quickly behind the counter, calling out names scribbled on paper cups. Among them was Elena Rivera, a 24-year-old barista who had been working double shifts to pay off her college debt. Her life was routine. Brew coffee, smile at customers, and pretend that the weight of her struggles didn't exist. The bell above the door chimed, and the entire cafe seemed to hush. Walking in, accompanied by two Secret Service agents, was none other than President Donald Trump himself. Elena froze. She had seen politicians before, but never him, not in person. Customers turned in awe, whispering and pulling out their phones. Trump scanned the menu like any ordinary customer. "Medium coffee black," he said plainly. The order seemed so simple, yet the room buzzed with tension. Elena stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for a cup. She wrote Donald on it with a shaky marker. But when she handed him the coffee, she noticed something. His expression wasn't the confident one plastered on TV. It was quieter, almost thoughtful, and before he turned away, he caught her eyes. For a split second, she wondered if he could sense her own battles hidden behind her polite smile. Elena didn't know why, but as she watched him take his first sip, she felt a question forming in her chest, a question that might change both of their lives. Elena couldn't focus for the rest of her shift. Her coworkers teased her. "You served the president. Did he tip?" But she stayed quiet. What haunted her was the fleeting eye contact. It felt like an unspoken recognition of pain, though she couldn't imagine how. During her break, she sat at a corner table chewing on her pen. She thought about her mother, who was battling cancer back home in Texas, about her father, who had left when she was 10, about the endless bills, the sacrifices, the nights she cried in silence. What would it take to break through the walls of power and status to make someone like Trump see her world? When she returned to the counter, she was startled to see him still there, sitting by the window. Most people came and left quickly, but he lingered, sipping his coffee slowly, as if savoring not just the drink, but the moment of anonymity. Her heart pounded. Maybe she had one chance. Gathering courage, she walked to his table with a napkin in her hand. "Excuse me, sir," she whispered. Trump looked up, raising an eyebrow. "I don't usually do this, but I have a request," she said, her voice trembling. She placed the napkin down, words scribbled in shaky ink. "Would you listen to one story?"
Just one.
For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, with surprising gentleness, he nodded. "All right, tell me." And in that instant, Elena realized she wasn't just a barista anymore. She was a voice waiting to be heard. Elena sat across from Trump, the cafe buzzing in the background. She clutched her apron nervously. "I grew up in San Antonio. My mom raised me alone after my dad left. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to put food on the table." Trump leaned back, hands folded. He didn't interrupt, which surprised her. "I was the first in my family to go to college," Elena continued. "I studied nursing because I wanted to help people, but then Mom got sick.
Cancer.
I had to drop out halfway to support her. Now I'm here making lattes, watching the bills pile up, wondering if dreams are only for people who can afford them." Her voice cracked. She hadn't meant to sound so vulnerable in front of him, but it was too late. The truth had slipped out. Trump's gaze softened. "That's tough. Very tough. Most people don't realize how hard it is for young people like you. You're carrying the weight of 2 lives, not just one." Elena blinked. She didn't expect empathy. She expected a polite nod, maybe a dismissive word, but not this. "Why did you tell me this?" he asked. "Because sometimes powerful people forget what life is like for the rest of us," she said quietly. "And I guess I wanted someone to remember." The room felt heavier. Trump looked at his coffee, then back at her. "You'd be surprised," he said softly, "how much I remember." Trump tapped his fingers on the cup, his expression unreadable. "You know, Elena, people think they know me. They see the speeches, the headlines, but what they don't see are the nights I couldn't sleep. The weight of making decisions that affect millions. The people I couldn't help even when I wanted to." Elena tilted her head, surprised at the vulnerability in his voice. When I was young, I watched my father work harder than anyone I knew. He wasn't perfect, but he taught me something. Success means nothing if you can't look someone in the eye and say you tried your best for them. Elena's eyes stung. So, do you feel like you've tried your best? She asked. The question hung between them. Trump sighed, almost weary. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But hearing your story, it reminds me that every policy, every decision isn't about numbers. It's about faces. People like you. People who can't afford to be invisible. Elena swallowed hard. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Just then, a customer called her name from the counter, snapping her back to reality. She stood reluctantly. I should get back. Trump gave a small nod. Thank you for telling me your story. Not many would have the courage. As she walked away, Elena felt lighter. She had spoken her truth, but she didn't know yet that this simple conversation was only the beginning of something much bigger. The cafe emptied slowly, but Trump remained seated until the last sip of coffee was gone. When he finally stood, Elena noticed something unusual. On the table where he sat next to his empty cup was a folded napkin. She waited until he left with his security detail before approaching. Carefully, she picked it up. In bold handwriting it read, "Don't stop fighting for your dreams. You've got more strength than you know, DT." Her hands shook. The president had left her a message, not for the cameras, not for the world, but just for her. She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket and returned to work, her heart pounding. That night, as she closed the store, she pulled the napkin out again. She read the words over and over. They didn't erase the bills or her mother's illness, but they gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time.
Hope.
Elena whispered to herself, maybe my story isn't over yet. And somewhere across the city, Donald Trump sat quietly in his motorcade, thinking about the young barista who had reminded him of something he feared he was forgetting. The power of listening. The next morning, Elena's phone buzzed nonstop. She groaned half asleep until she opened her messages. Dozens of friends had sent her links. You're trending on Twitter, one text read. Confused, she clicked the link. There it was, a blurry photo of her sitting across from Trump at Starbucks, looking nervous but determined. The caption read, Barista opens up to president during coffee break. What did she say? Her stomach dropped. She hadn't asked for attention. This was supposed to be private. By the time she got to work, reporters were outside, cameras flashing. Her manager looked stressed, but proud. You're famous now, Elena. People want to hear your story. Elena didn't know what to think. She had only wanted to be heard by one person, not the whole world. Inside the White House, Trump's aides showed him the coverage. He studied the photos quietly. One aide joked, "She might become a symbol, sir." Trump didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "She already is." That evening, as Elena was closing up the store, her phone rang from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello, Elena. This is the White House. Her knees almost buckled. The White House?
Yes.
The president was moved by your conversation yesterday. He would like to invite you to a private meeting if you're comfortable. Elena's heart raced. Was this real? She stammered.
I don't know what to say.
Say yes, the aide replied warmly.
She did.
When she hung up, Elena sat on the floor shaking. What had she gotten herself into? She was just a barista, not a politician, not a speaker. What could she possibly say that would matter in a room like that? But then she remembered her mother's words. Courage isn't about being ready. It's about speaking when your heart knows it has to. And Elena knew she had to speak. The next day, Elena stood in the Oval Office, palms sweaty. The grandeur of the room overwhelmed her, the flags, the polished desk, the history embedded in the walls. Trump entered, offering a small smile. Elena, glad you came. She nodded nervously. Thank you for inviting me. They sat down, and Trump leaned forward. Tell me more. Yesterday you gave me a glimpse, but I want the whole picture. What's it like for people like you, your generation? Elena hesitated, then let her heart spill. She spoke about crushing student debt, healthcare costs that drained families, the feeling of working endlessly and still falling behind. She described the loneliness of young people who felt invisible, caught between dreams and survival. Trump listened intently, not interrupting. At one point, he even scribbled notes. When she finished, her voice trembling, she said, "I don't expect miracles. I just wanted you to know what it feels like to be us." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Trump said softly, "You've given me something no report or statistic could ever give: perspective." And in that moment, Elena realized she had spoken not just for herself, but for millions. Before she left, Trump stood and looked her in the eye. "Elena, I can't promise to fix everything overnight, but I promise you this. I won't forget your words. When I sit in this office and make decisions, I'll remember the barista from Starbucks who reminded me who I'm serving." Elena's throat tightened. "That means more than you know." He handed her a card with a private contact number. "If you ever feel like your voice isn't being heard, call this directly." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Walking out of the White House, Elena clutched the card as if it were a lifeline. For the first time in years, she believed her story mattered. She didn't know how, but she sensed her life was about to change. When Elena returned home that night, she rushed to tell her mother, who was resting in bed. She showed her the napkin and the card, explaining everything through tears and laughter. Her mother squeezed her hand weakly. "I always told you, mija, you were born with a voice that could move mountains. Now, even a president listens to you." Elena smiled through tears. "I just wanted someone to see us, Mom." Her mother whispered, "And you did. Not just for us, for so many others." The words sank deep into Elena's heart. She wasn't just carrying her family's story anymore. She was carrying a generation's. Over the next week, Elena's story spread like wildfire. News outlets called her the barista who spoke truth to power. Students wrote to her thanking her for voicing their struggles. Parents reached out saying she had given them hope that someone was listening. Elena was overwhelmed. She wasn't used to attention, but she couldn't deny the impact. She realized that sometimes a simple story could ripple outward, touching lives she'd never meet. Meanwhile, Trump brought her story up in a cabinet meeting. "This isn't about politics," he said firmly. "It's about people like her. If we forget them, we lose everything." His staff exchanged surprised glances. The barista from Starbucks had left a mark, but with attention came criticism. Online trolls accused Elena of seeking fame, of making up her story for sympathy. Some even said she was being used as a political pawn. The cruel comment stung. One night, Elena cried quietly, wondering if she had made a mistake. She told her mother, "Maybe I should have stayed silent." Her mother shook her head. "No, Elena, silence never changes the world. Remember, the louder the critics, the stronger the truth." Those words steadied her. She knew she had to keep going. Not for herself, but for everyone who felt voiceless. A week later, Trump returned to the same Starbucks. Cameras followed him this time, but he asked them to wait outside. When he entered, Elena was wiping the counter. Her jaw dropped. "You came back?" He smiled. "I owed you a refill." The cafe erupted in laughter, but beneath the humor was something deeper. Respect. Trump wasn't just keeping a promise. He was showing the world that listening mattered. This time when Elena handed him his coffee, he said, "I have a question for you now." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "What would you do?" he asked, "if you had the power to change just one thing?" Elena froze. 1,000 answers rushed through her mind. Student loans, health care, wages. But she took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. "I'd change the way people see each other," she said softly. "We're so divided, so angry. If we could just see each other as human, like you saw me that day, maybe we'd fight less and listen more." The cafe went silent. Even the other baristas stopped working. Trump nodded slowly. "That is powerful, and you're right." For the first time, Elena saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Humility. Before leaving, Trump said, "Elena, next week, I'm giving a speech. I want you there, not as a guest in the crowd, but on stage with me. Her mouth fell open. On stage? Why me? Because your story needs to be heard, and not just by me. She hesitated, fear swirling in her chest. But then she remembered the napkin. Don't stop fighting for your dreams. She nodded. I'll be there. The day of the speech arrived. Elena stood backstage, her knees trembling. She looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, cameras flashing. Trump introduced her with surprising warmth. This is Elena Rivera. She's not a politician. She's not wealthy. She's a barista. But she taught me something that every leader needs to remember. Behind every policy are real people with real struggles and real dreams. The crowd erupted in applause. Elena stepped forward, voice shaky but steady. She told her story just as she had in Starbucks about her mom, her debts, her dreams. When she finished, the room was silent. Then slowly, people rose to their feet clapping. Some even wiped tears. Elena realized in that moment her voice could change more than just her own life. Clips of Elena's speech spread across the internet. Students, workers, single parents, all saw themselves in her words. She became a symbol not of politics but of resilience and hope. Elena received letters from across the country. Some shared their own struggles. Others simply said, "Thank you for speaking for us." She was humbled. She had never asked to be a voice. Yet here she was, proof that sometimes the most ordinary people carried the most extraordinary power. One evening, after weeks of whirlwind attention, Elena came home to find a package waiting. Inside was a simple framed napkin, the one Trump had left for her that first day. But beneath it was a handwritten note. You reminded me what leadership is about. Don't ever underestimate your voice, Donald J. Trump. Elena sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face. That napkin, once a small message of encouragement, was now a symbol of a turning point in her life. Months later, Elena's mother's health worsened. The bills grew heavier. Elena feared she might lose her despite everything. One morning, she received a call. "Miss Rivera, your mother's treatment costs have been fully covered." Anonymous donor. Elena's eyes widened. She didn't need to guess. She knew. Her mother, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "He didn't just listen. He acted." Elena hugged her tightly. "We're not invisible anymore, Mom. Not to him. Not to anyone." Years later, Elena would look back on that ordinary Tuesday at Starbucks as the day everything changed. A simple act of courage, asking to be heard, had sparked a ripple that touched thousands, maybe millions. She still kept the napkin framed on her wall, not as a reminder of Trump or even of politics, but of a truth she had learned. Every story matters. Every voice can create change.